Welcome back to the Mandarin Blueprint Podcast. My name is Phil Crimmins. This is podcast 142. So we've come out with a lot of these at this point, almost 3 years worth. Now, the Mandarin Blueprint Podcast, if you're unfamiliar, is a Q&A podcast. We cover the comments, questions, and just general queries that might have come in on the Mandarin Blueprint Method video course. Now, the primary source of questions comes from the lessons themselves. So we have a lesson about how to learn a Chinese character, or how to learn a Chinese word, or learn that word in the context of sentences, which kind of intuitively teaches grammar. And we also have grammar lessons as well. And people will ask a question in those actual lessons, and we'll respond to them on the podcast or in writing form during the week. Now, we also get some questions coming in through email or through the community forum, but that is the purpose of this podcast, to answer those questions for the people in the course. And if you're curious, about the Mandarin Blueprint Method, you can do a free trial for 30 days. With no credit card required, because we're not interested in trying to sneakily charge you, because we're certain that after you try out the Mandarin Blueprint Method, you'll realize that this method for learning Chinese is highly innovative. It gets you to the point of learning Chinese characters much faster, which in turn makes the whole process of learning Chinese way quicker. I was just reading today a Quora post by a Chinese teacher suggesting that it was going to take 8 to 10 years to learn Mandarin like a native speaker. Now, it depends on what you mean by like a native speaker, but one of her premises was that you can only learn about 400 characters per year, which I actually laughed, because with the Mandarin Blueprint Method, we've had people already in well under a year learn 1,530 characters, and they could have done more if we had finished our advanced course already, which is going to take you out to 3,000 characters. She was right about one thing, which is that you need to know about 3,000 characters in order to learn Chinese. But in her perspective, 400 characters a year, that's going to take you many years just to get to 3,000. And really getting to 3,000 characters is just your foundation for being able to read lots of content. What's really going to make you fluent and literate is reading lots of content. But if you can minimize the amount of time that it takes to learn characters and get those 3,000 characters in more like 1 to 2 years or 1 to 1.5 years, that really changes the whole game of learning Mandarin and how long it's going to take, because that will allow you to pick up almost any piece of Chinese material and learn at a much faster rate. So if you imagine you're reading an article in Chinese, you might not have seen the characters combined in certain ways the way they are, and that will certainly come up all the time. However, the fact that you can read the characters means that you have several things aiding you in your understanding. You have the context of the entire article. What's the entire article trying to say? And because you can kind of follow it in general, you have a general sense of what the article's trying to say. Then you have two characters that maybe you've never seen go together, but you know how they're pronounced and you know their primary meanings. And maybe you even know their secondary and tertiary meanings. In which case, even if you've never seen the word before, you've got a pretty good chance of understanding it, because you also have the context of the sentence and the paragraph and the entire article. So learning Chinese characters, getting to about 3,000 Chinese characters in under 2 years is an achievable goal, and it will make it so that you can actually become fluent and literate in far less time than was ever possible before. And that's what the Mandarin Blueprint Method is doing through our various techniques for learning character components, characters, vocabulary words, grammar, and it's very systemized. We're actually patent pending right now, and we've just passed the second stage of our patent pending process. So far, the patent offices in the U.S. have recognized, yes, this is truly an innovation. It's truly something that is not available anywhere else. And so it can go to the next phase of the patent pending process, which is great news. And it's also something that is a testament to the fact that you really can't find this anywhere else. So we hope that you'll indulge us in that little intro there. And before we get into the Q&As that are coming up today, I wanted to give an update, as we will be doing every week for the foreseeable future, on our advanced course, GoFundMe. So if you're unfamiliar, we've been running a GoFundMe campaign that has a goal of raising $50,000 by the end of November 2021. So right now, as of recording, it's May of 2021, and we're doing pretty well. Between GoFundMe and PayPal, we've raised just around $10,000. On GoFundMe itself, $6,685, but several people also gave us donations on PayPal, and so we are right around $10,000, which for the first 2 weeks, because we've been running this for 2 weeks, that's great. This week was a little slower than the first week, but that's somewhat to be expected. Of course, the first week, many people would donate right away. And, what we're looking for is something here where maybe people consider making monthly donations for a while, or, maybe they just have heard of it for the first time and make a one-time donation. Everything is fine. And of course, as we always want to point out here, we only want to accept donations from people where it's not hurting them financially to do so. So, if you're able to spare $5 and it doesn't hurt you financially to do so, or if you're able to spare $500 and it doesn't hurt you financially to do so, then we would appreciate it. It will help get our advanced course out sooner rather than later. But also, as a couple of incentives, and I want to always make sure I clarify these incentives. If you donate $500 or more to the GoFundMe, then as we finish certain levels of the upper, intermediate, and advanced course, we will release them to those people. So, if you're a lifetime member, and that is to say somebody who took advantage of our sale in 2020 that we've long since not had up on our website, but in August of 2020, we had a big sale offering lifetime access to the Mandarin Blueprint courses, which means that you'll get access to all future courses for the money that you paid back in August of 2020. However, for those of you who just did that that purchase in August, you'll get the advanced course when it's completed, when we finish the whole thing. However, if you were to make an additional donation of $500 or more, then you will get early access to the advanced course. Now, many of you were not a part of that lifetime access sale. You didn't take advantage of it, or you just hadn't found Mandarin Blueprint yet by August 2020. Some of you have bought the full bundle. Some of you are monthly subscribers. For those of you there, you will have to buy the advanced course when it comes out later in the future, or you can make a $500 or more donation to our GoFundMe, in which case you will get the advanced course as soon as it's ready, including the earlier levels. So, for example, level 58 is the first level of the upper intermediate course, as we're going to call it. And as soon as we've solidified the character order and determined that level 58 is ready to go, we will release it to those of you who, on the GoFundMe, provided a $500 donation or higher. And by the way, you can get to that point over time. So, like, if you can't donate $500 this month, but you can donate $500 total by the end of November 2021, so maybe $100 a month for 5 months, then you will also receive that early access when you've reached that $500 threshold. So, with that in mind, let me give you some updates on how the upper intermediate and the advanced course are actually going, because I've been working on it, and we're making some great progress right off the bat. So, first of all, why am I saying upper intermediate at all? Because, of course, we always framed this as being about the advanced course. We have an intermediate course. And really what it comes down to is that I started doing the analysis of the characters and the vocabulary based on two primary sources. One is the new HSK lists. So, as we've talked about a few times on the podcast already, the 汉语水平考试, the Hanban, which is the organization that creates the Chinese as a second language level test, has updated their test, or at least they're going to by July of this year. And they've gone from 6 levels to 9 levels, and they've added a lot of vocabulary, and they've rearranged how it works. So, for example, the HSK1 used to cover 150 words. Now it covers 500 words. And the HSK3, the new HSK3, is very close to what the old HSK4 was. So, like, we kind of have to reassess what it means to pass these different tests. And as I was doing the analysis, I was very aware that, these are the words that cover the HSKs, say, 4, 5, and 6. And then these are the words that cover the HSKs 7, 8, and 9. And I could tell very clearly that the 7, 8, and 9 vocabulary is highly advanced. So that's the type of stuff where, you may not even end up actually using a lot of that vocabulary in real life. I mean, passive vocabulary is good, and you can understand more articles the more vocabulary that you have, but the likelihood that you'll actually use it in day-to-day life gets lower and lower. And so I realized we should really be breaking it down into an upper intermediate course, which essentially covers the vocab from the HSKs 4 through 6, the new HSKs 4 through 6, and then the advanced course gets into the new HSKs 7, 8, and 9. And this is important because you don't want to waste time on vocabulary that's too advanced for your level. So if you're at the point where you're just starting to get ready for the HSK 4, you really shouldn't be seeing HSK 9 vocabulary at that point, even if you know both of the characters, because the usage is going to be very abstract. It's going to be something that is like, maybe it's like an economic term, or it's a term for, how to handle a formal situation at a big event, that type of thing. And so it's better to come across that vocabulary when you know more of the language. If you're trying to do it when you're only at the HSK 4 level, then it's going to feel very abstract, weird, and tough to wrap your head around. Whereas if you focus on more the mid-level areas, the HSKs 4 through 6 first, get those down, and then move on to the advanced stuff, you're going to be much better prepared to master it. So we've set it up so that the upper intermediate course will cover those 4 through 6, but we don't just do the HSK. Like that would be, the HSK is a great test in a lot of ways. I mean, as a course creator, I have to recognize that so much work has gone into the HSKs, and I don't want to denigrate them at all. But I will say that there are times when they emphasize words that it's hard for me to understand why they would put so much emphasis on them, or they de-emphasize words that I think are very common in a lot of spoken Chinese. So there's a fair bit of spoken Chinese that doesn't get too well addressed in the HSKs. So we have another source of finding vocabulary, which is a huge lexicon that comes from all sorts of sources, primarily Weibo, which is like the Chinese Twitter. You've got loads of subtitles from TV shows, which are some of the best ways to get not only internet slang, but mostly spoken Chinese. Comic books are a part of this, and then also newspapers, periodicals, and formal Chinese. So it's a huge lexicon of over 1 billion characters. And then from there, it generates frequencies of both the characters and the words. So you can see this word occurred, say, 1,500,000 times in this billion character lexicon. That's a lot. So you better see that word a fair bit. And actually, by the time you reach the upper intermediate course, there aren't really any words that are that occurred over 1 million times. But we kind of look at that. We see what is the occurrence of a word, and of course, we don't cover literally every possible word that you could come up with, because if a word only has 10,000 occurrences, say, in 1 billion, that's not much. You're not going to use that word very much. And it also might be a very specialized word. So we're not going to teach you literally every one, but we find that nice balance between the HSK vocabulary, which, people want to pass the HSK, so we'll make sure we cover all of that, and also that good spoken Chinese that's not, so you're not just sounding too formal all the time. So with that in mind, as we've been building up the level 58, 59, 60, and 61, which is kind of, they're not finished, but I have the outline set up for those 4 levels. We've been making some, interesting discoveries. We realized, okay, we're going to make this into the upper intermediate course and the advanced course. And we're also going to put things together in 100-character blocks. So what I mean by that is that we could just say, here's all the remaining characters. Let's organize them by common component and then just introduce them as they come. And this is an okay technique, but here's why I don't like it. Because if you were to take the remaining, say, 2,000 characters that we're going to add to the course and just organize them by common component, then you'd have characters that are frequency number like 3,000 or 3,200 coming up very early in the upper intermediate or the advanced course. And that is unnecessary by the time you reach the upper intermediate course, because by that point you understand how the method works and you get how components and props work. So if you don't have, say, 20 characters that have a common prop all in a row, it's okay. You can just have a few, like 2 or 3 characters that share a common prop. You kind of work with that prop for a few scenes and then you move on. And so what we've done is taken the next 100 most frequent characters, figured out what's the vocabulary that gets unlocked from the HSKs 4, 5, and 6. Then what's the vocabulary that gets unlocked from the HSKs 7, 8, and 9, and prepare those for the advanced course. And then we build the course starting from that structure. Now, there are 15 characters remaining from the HSKs 2 and 3. The foundation course and the intermediate course cover everything in the HSK 1 and the vast majority of what is in the HSKs 2 and 3. But like I said, they made new HSK tests. So they have new word lists, and there were 15 characters that were included in the new HSKs 2 and 3 that we didn't have covered in the foundation or the intermediate course. So in level 58, the first level, you'll have several characters that are associated with the HSKs 2 and 3. As a result, levels 58 and 59 have a fair bit of vocabulary, but slightly fewer characters. So they're about 35 characters each, but there's a lot of unlocked vocabulary. But what was very interesting is that once I got to level 60 and 61, now we're totally into the 4, 5, and 6 territory. There were a lot fewer unlocked words for each character. And this makes sense because, of course, the deeper you get into character learning, the less frequent the characters are, and therefore the fewer words they will unlock. And this makes it so that when you learn a new character, you'll be able to move on relatively quickly. So the experience of it will be something like levels 58 and 59 are vocabulary heavy, but they're going to be a lot of great stuff that you'll use pretty quickly. And then from then on, it'll be more about the characters and a little bit less about the vocabulary. And therefore, we can fit in some more advanced words that are made up of characters from the foundation and intermediate course, which will get you into that 4, 5, and 6 territory. So this is all very exciting stuff. Also, there was one thing I wanted to talk about, which was something that Christine brought up. So Christine, we did 2 interviews with her. She's a Mandarin Blueprint Pro user, I would say. And she sent us an email when we set up the GoFundMe saying like, hey, maybe you guys are trying to do too much by trying to include the vocabulary and all of that. Maybe you should just release a character order without the vocabulary first, because then you can get it out quicker. And it was interesting because when I read that, I thought that something doesn't sound right about that, but I couldn't really articulate it. And then I started doing the character order, and I remembered that when you're building this order, you have to take into account the words that get unlocked. So for example, there's a character Xu, which is one of those characters that happens to be in the new HSKs 2 and 3. So we introduce it very early in the level 58. And so it has to do with permission or allowing things, and it has the props of the megaphone and the sort of noon prop for 中午、下午、上午, that particular prop. And it means to allow, permit, whatever. Now, when I looked at the words that are high frequency that use this character, there was one word, 允许, that is within the HSKs 4, 5, and 6. It is reasonably high frequency, but the other character, 允, is only used in this word. It's the only word that unlocks of any frequency with this character. So the character is low frequency, but the word is high frequency. So that's the type of thing where if you just based it on character frequency, you would not catch that. And so you need to consider the words, because the only place it makes sense to introduce 允 from 允许 is right before or after 许, because it's the only character that it even gets placed with in the entire order. So I noticed this happens about once or twice per level, and it's the kind of thing that if I didn't do properly from the beginning, I would kick myself about it later, because once we set the order in place, it's really difficult to change it because there's so many things you have to redo and you have to reanalyze all of these different sentences and all of this different content because you, like, for example, suppose I said that 允许 was a word that is in level 58, and then a bunch of people who are writers for us wrote content that thought, okay, 允许 is a known word as of level 58, and then I move it to level 64, all of a sudden you have this top-down word from levels 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63. Anytime 允许 came up, it becomes a top-down word, and it's just a big pain to try to figure that out. So we have to take into account the vocabulary in order to know whether or not the order makes sense from below, from the perspective of the components, from the character frequency itself. So what is the pure frequency of the actual characters? 许, super high frequency character. 允, low frequency character. But because of that third step, vocabulary gets introduced right there with 许. So I just wanted to point that out, that while it certainly slows us down that we have to take into account vocabulary, if we didn't, we'd be doing wrong by you. We'd be 对不起你们, right? So that's an important element to what makes the upper, intermediate, and the advanced course tick. All right. So with that in mind, and just as a final statement about this, I would just say that it's been very gratifying to finally get really working on this advanced course. And so thank you so much to those of you who have donated. If you would like to donate and ensure that we can focus our energies on this advanced course, then you can do so at the links. I've left them in the show notes already. They're the GoFundMe page. And if you don't want to donate via GoFundMe, we also have a PayPal link to donate there. And so a thank you to the people who donated this week. We have David Garcia donating $30, Sandra Rashuti donating $25. She says, keep going, we will. Darren Grisdale donated $500. Thank you so much, Darren. Hunter McCoy donated $50. He says, thank you for all the work you put in, all the courses you've created. Our pleasure. We also received 2 anonymous donations of $200 and $50, respectively. So thanks to those 2 anonymous donors. And we also received a PayPal donation from Cindy Menches for $100. And she says, Phil and Luke, I hope your campaign goes well. I will donate more than once. This donation is a start. Thanks. So our big thanks to all of those of you who donated. And like I say, if anybody else would like to donate, the links are in the description of this podcast. Let's move on to the comments and emails from customers this week. We have a community forum post by somebody going by the name of Canadian Defector. She says, hello, new purchaser here. My story. When we lived in California, I made several good Chinese friends, but it never occurred to me to start learning. We live in Kansas City area now. I've long been a fan of kung fu movies, and about a year ago enjoyed watching the entire Eternal Love 10 Miles of Peach Blossoms series on Netflix. By the end, I could recognize a lot of words, and the thought, you could do this, you could learn Chinese, wouldn't go away. After fully exhausting Duolingo, I didn't know what else to do to keep learning, and I've been struggling with actually remembering what I've learned. I'm fortunate to have friends I can chat with in Mandarin on a weekly basis, but it's embarrassing because I rely too much on my notes, and my tones have needed some serious help. Time to find a better way to learn. I found Mandarin Blueprint through the pins I've been saving to my Pinterest board. I just blew through all of the free content, started using Anki, and I decided to take the plunge before the sale ends. I'm hopeful this will be just the thing I need to master what I've already learned and to continue my learning journey. Well, welcome. This is a common story. I have heard many people bring up Duolingo as their initial attempt at learning Chinese. And Duolingo is, it's definitely better than nothing, but it doesn't have as comprehensive of a system as Mandarin Blueprint does. I mean, it's to be expected, right? Duolingo does many different languages, jack of all trades, master of none. Mandarin Blueprint, we're focused on one language. So we're very focused on exactly what it is that you need to know. And hey, we've been through it, so we know the areas where we tripped up. And luckily now, you also have all the people who are ahead of you who've left their notes and comments about where they've tripped up. So you're in good shape now, and I would just recommend just make sure you keep that daily habit going, and you'll be all set for the future. So thanks to Canadian Defector for that community forum post. Ric Santos on Vocab Unlocked from Pete. This is the character for 脾气, although this is not really too much related to the actual character. He says, by now as I reach the end of level 48, I thank Luke and Phil for the particular talent of the Mandarin Blueprint Method teaching only what is needed to move on steadily forward. Their task is not to overload us learners with a complete volume at once. I say this because only in these past 2 lessons that I learned very weird characters readily and with ease, because the right moment has come. So to Luke and Phil, thank you for what you did not teach in the earlier lessons. Surely there were those who questioned, why did you not include this? Or why have you omitted that? And why are topics incomplete? And so on. We would have been overwhelmed, discouraged, frustrated, and most probably discontinued. An example of that is 啤酒的啤. This is the first time I succeeded to write it correctly using cracked as a hint word. This led to a cereal that is not perfect, and although not perfect, it was not discarded totally. Rather, it was brewed to be drunk as beer. So similarly, spleen, which is the character in this lesson, also cleans damaged cells, giving the body a renewed force. So thank you again for not teaching everything at once and allowing Mandarin to grow in us. Well, I'm glad that you understand that perspective there, Rick. I think that, one of the things that I was just talking about earlier in building the advanced course is trying to strike that balance, right? On the one hand, you want people, like, there's definitely this instinct to be like, here's all of the words you could learn with this new character. But on the other hand, you want to be like, okay, frequency really does matter. Frequency is super important. And it's the kind of thing where if, you're learning something that is low frequency too early, you're not going to have opportunities to practice it. And you're not going to have the deluge of characters that you have every day from reading actual native Chinese content if you're not ready to read native Chinese content. And so if you're looking at a character that is the type, or character or word that is the type of thing that even a native Chinese person doesn't see that often, then the only place you're going to see it with any frequency is in native Chinese content. So don't waste your time too early with that stuff until you're ready. So I'm so glad that Rick gets that, and hopefully that we'll pay that forward to future people who are earlier on in the course. Chris Lewis on Tian in context. He says, I love Chinese and learning with you guys. I can't believe how simple the language is when you know just a few things. Oxygen is just these 2 characters, qi and yang. That's right. Yeah, oxygen, the character for oxygen is just yang underneath the qi component, and it's pronounced yang. I realize it's not a requirement, but my Y actor is in the living room looking up out the window of my friend's house at the millions of sheep sucking up all the air. And subsequently, there is no oxygen for her and she passes out. Even the word cardio is locked in too. Thank you, Mandarin Blueprint. Yeah, because cardio is simple. It's just 有氧, right? So it has oxygen. 有氧运动. So like, yeah, that's really simple language in a lot of ways. That's why, that whole 8 to 10 years to learn Chinese that I read about on Quora is, that's based on old knowledge. That was before Mandarin Blueprint existed. All right. Matt Shubert on 别 in context. He said, I've heard that 别 is just a shortening of 不要. Could the first sentence be even more compressed by saying 别这样, 我们别分开? I could imagine a sentence like this being said in a rushed, panicked way, so the less words, the better for the tone, assuming it's correct. Because, the sentence means, don't be that way, let's not separate. And in this case, it would be fine. So it's just, you want to be careful with this rule, because 别 is a shortening of 不要, if 不要 means don't, because that's what 别 means. It means don't. And so sometimes 不要 means do not want, which is different enough, or won't, will not. And so do not want is not the same as don't. So if it is do not want, if that is the actual meaning, then you could not replace it with 别. So for example, if the sentence was not 别这样, 我们别分开, if it was instead 别这样, 我不要我们分开. If that were just a slight change to the sentence, then 别 wouldn't work, because in that case, he's setting the subject as 我, talking about his internal state, which is not wanting something, 不要. 我不要我们分开. I don't want us to separate. So I do not want us to separate. Then 别 would not be a replacement for 不要. But 不要 can often mean don't, in which case 别 is the replacement. And it works fine. So thanks for the question from Matt. Next, we have Eileen Roberson on Make a Movie for Gan. She said, if I'm not immediately clicking with the movie making method, am I doomed? Does that mean this course is not for me? No, that does not mean the course is not for you, at least not yet. Because Make a Movie for Gan is the last movie in level 1, and nobody is going to totally get it by the end of level 1. Really, most people report that they have a good sense of how long it took by maybe 30 to 50 characters into the course. So Gan is character 5. We wouldn't expect you to get it right now. So here are my suggestions if you're feeling this way at the Make a Movie for Gan at character number 5. One is to read the articles that are available in the sidebar about the Henze movie method. We also have that in book form. So if you go on our website and look at the resources tab and see the ebook section, you can download the free Henze movie method ebook, which has, basically the same information, just all in one PDF. And that will help you get the conceptual framework for it. But the best way is just to keep practicing it and really listen to the videos, take them nice and slow. It's perfectly fine to move slowly in the early sections of the course, because in the early sections of the course, you're learning an entirely new skill of mnemonic visualization. And mnemonic visualization is in some ways easy, but it doesn't mean it takes no practice to get used to it. You have to, get used to finding the memory in your brain that's relevant to the character you're trying to learn. So in the case of character number 5, it's very early. You should not give up yet. Now, there are some people who struggle with mnemonic visualization where they can't see anything in their mind's eye at all. This is a condition called aphantasia. And so it's literally like I say, imagine an apple with your eyes closed. And if you can't do it, you might have aphantasia. If that's the case, it's actually not true to say the course is not for you. It's just that you would have to use non-visual mnemonics. You'd have to use entirely sound mnemonics, feel mnemonics, just your other senses, essentially. Even taste if you needed to. Could you smell something? And so that being the case, if you can't visualize something in your mind's eye, it would be comparatively more of a struggle. But on the other hand, your alternative is still rote learning, and rote learning is like the most tedious thing you could possibly imagine. You always want to remember compared to what. It's like learning this new skill of visualization might seem like an extra step, but compared to what is necessary to learn 3,000 characters by rote, 3,000 times writing them over and over and repeating their pinyin at least 100 times means that you're talking about 300,000 times of writing something, and it still won't even stick. And if you've forgotten it, there's no method by which you can then relearn it. You just have to start from scratch. Whereas with the Henze movie method, if you learn a character, you have a visualization in your mind. It's like, okay, Arnold Schwarzenegger was in the bedroom of my childhood home, and there was a badger, and what was the other thing that was there? I've forgotten what was the other thing that was there. But even if you forgot something, you still have Arnold Schwarzenegger in the bedroom of your childhood home with a badger. So you just need to realize, it was a spoon. That was the other thing. It was a badger and a spoon. And and then what were they doing? Well, everybody's going to have their own stories. The idea is that you have a foundation by which to remember something that's based on visual face recognition, 3D spatial imaging. Where am I in space? How far am I away from the ceilings, the walls? How are we able to figure all that stuff out? It's highly evolved visual cortex stuff. Object constancy, core object recognition. That's why we use objects as props. And then, of course, movement. And what are the actors, sets, and props doing to interact? That's the meaning of the character. And so, there's several moving parts to this, and it takes a little bit to get used to. But remember, you're using your highly evolved skills of facial recognition, 3D spatial imaging, core object recognition, and sensitivity to movement, which are all things that even if you had an IQ of 50, you'd still be good at because they're like evolutionary gifts that we're all born with, right? So with that in mind, don't give up quite yet, Eileen. And I think that the course will indeed prove to be for you. William Beeman on Vocab Unlocked from 10. Could you guys say something about the construction verb le, verb, like 10 le 10 in this example? In reading, I see this often, and of course it is comprehensible, but could we have a clearer reading of it, of its use, and the meaning as opposed to verb le, or just the verb by itself? Thanks. So I will say that on one angle of this, there's not a set example because some verbs are very rarely used by themselves. They're usually used in compound words like 10所. But because 10 is actually, it's got the finger component, it has a physical element to it, it's possible for it to actually be a physical thing. Like, da can be actually hitting somebody, chuo can be poking somebody, there's different, pai can be to pat somebody. There are these physical things you do with your hands. S is ripping. And so in the case of 10, like 10 is like delving into something. And if you say 10, that would mean like kind of delving into something for a moment. So like there's like a bucket or something and you're delving your hand into it, to the depths of it, or into a pond, and you're, 10. That is to do it for a moment. So when you have like 10 or 10 or 10一下, those are all do that verb for a moment, right? 打一打他的脸, right? So hit his face for a moment, right? And so like there's different ways of doing it. Now, if it's already happened, but it already happened for a moment, then you put le instead of i. So 10了10. So it's done. He's already done the searching into the pond with his finger to try to, search deep below, right? And now, so in that case, that's straightforward. It's just that it was for a moment and it's a completed action. So that's fine. But in the case of like changing it around to saying just the verb plus le, it depends on the verb. So like some verbs you can use by themselves, in which case you could just say, 跑了, fine, 走了, perfectly fine. But some verbs, it feels weird. Like it just doesn't sound right to say 10了. I don't really ever hear that. Usually there's some other compound word related thing to it. So like 探索is like to deep dive into something. That's, in that case, it's kind of a more metaphorical meaning. So you could say 探索了. That would be fine. But you would not really just say 探了. You usually tend to add the doubling up of it in that case. And so when that's the case, when that's not the case, it kind of depends on the verb. And so unfortunately, it's one of those things where like, I don't think there's a hard and fast rule as to which verbs you can use by themselves or which verbs you can use with just le. And also some verbs don't work with the, verb e verb or verb le verb structure. So it's just the kind of thing you're going to have to focus on when you see it happening in the wild, and then go, okay, I understood that. I guess I can do it that way, right? Ric Angleland on 火 in context. So here's the sentence. 我拿出一支蜡烛点上了火 is 点, specifically meaning to ignite here. That's right, 点. It has a lot of different meanings. I mean, it can mean a dot. It can mean a piece of information, like just that piece, like 这一点, like this piece of information. And as a verb, it can mean to ignite, like a lighter. 点火would be like a 大火机 is a cigarette lighter, and to turn it on, that action is 点. And I mean, theoretically, you could use a match and 点火柴, which would be to light a match. And so, yeah, 点 in that case means to ignite as a verb. Ric Angleland on 重 in context. This can also be 重. So when it's pronounced 重, it means heavy. But in this case, it's 重, which means to repeat or, start again, or repeat in the sense of doing again. So the phrase is 你要重做. You have to do it again. You should do it again, okay? Would it also be correct to say 你要再做? And that's fine to say 你要再做, but technically the meaning is slightly different. There's an implication that 你要重做 has that 你要再做 doesn't. So, for example, suppose that I painted some numbers on the grass for a football pitch. And then or let's just say some lines. And then I realized, or somebody realizes that I did it wrong and I put the line in the wrong spot. They might say, 你要重做, because I have to do it again because it was wrong. Like it's the doing it again is a complete renewal of the initial one, right? Whereas 你要再做 doesn't have any implication of how the previous one went. So like if I say 你要重做, it's like, oh, your homework was done totally wrong. You have to do it again from the beginning, right? Whereas, 你要再做 could be that the previous time you did it was fine. It's just that you need to do it again, right? So, I don't know, just something that doesn't imply that you did it wrong the first time. You go to the gym and you do 10 pull-ups, right? And then your trainer says, okay, you have to do 10 more pull-ups, 你要再做, right? That's fine, but it doesn't indicate that the previous way was wrong, and that's why you have to start over. It's got that sense of start over when you say 重, right? Whereas 再 just means, again, there's no other implication. There's no, start over implication with it. Next, we have Matt Shubert on 空气 in context. He says, 空气中有臭味. What's the 中 doing here? Is it just specifying the air right here in the middle of us is the area that smells bad, not necessarily the air around us, across the room, etc.? So 中 in this case just means among. And 空气, obviously that's air. There's a lot of things in it. There's nitrogen, there's oxygen, there's many things. But among them is a 臭味, which is something smelly, a smelly flavor. Because 味 means flavor of the mouth or also flavor in your nose. So it's kind of cool that in Chinese those are both the same, 味道. So 空气中, so among the air, within the air, there is a 臭味, a smelly smell. And so that's just something you'll hear a lot when it comes to something that's among other things. And it's not on the outside. It's not clearly to one side, to the left, to the right, under, above. It's just among it, within it. You'll hear 中 in that case. So, and then in the case of, and part of the reason I would say that it's 中 and not 里, which 里means inside, is that 里tends to have clearer boundaries. The air is, the boundaries of the air are kind of not as clear necessarily. Is the air, where is the air have a smelly smell? Is it just in this room? It's whereas li is something's inside the bag, and the bag has very clear boundaries, and so it's 在包里有个臭味. But 空气中 among, in that area. So hopefully that clears up that question. Next, we have Christopher Weeks on Vocab Unlocked from 可以, 以为, 以上, 以下. He says, does 以上 and 以下 work with regards to height limits for roller coasters? For example, you must be above or below this height or weight to ride the attraction. Sure, you could say 1.6米以下不能坐这个过山车. That's a roller coaster. 过山车. So it's kind of funny. It's to go to traverse the mountain car, which is kind of funny. 1.6米. So 1 meter 60 basically, so 160 centimeters. So you say 160 centimeters is 1.6. And that would be if you're 1.6以下. And then therefore if you're 150 centimeters, sorry, you're too short. as an example. Next, we have William Beeman on Vocab Unlocked from 调. I don't quite get 请你把车头调过来. Is it please turn the car around? Please make a U-turn? I especially don't understand the 车头. Car head, car front of the car. Can you parse this? Yes, 车头. So like you could think of it by analogy to a human. So like what's the brain of a car? The brain of the car is the engine. And with the exception of some sports cars that have the engine in the back, the engine is usually in the front of the car. And so if you say 车头, that's like saying the head of the car, what's in the head, it's the engine or the brain. And so that the head of the car is the front of the car. And so then 掉头in general, whether you're in a car or not, means to turn around. So if you just switch it around and say 把车头调过来, that means U-turn. So that means make a U-turn. And so hopefully that clears that up. But yeah, think of it by analogy to a human. So where's the head of the car? The part that has the engine in it, which is the front. So the 车头 is the front of the car. And again, you would not call like a Porsche's 车头the back. It's still the front regardless. But the idea is it's what is most cars. Most cars, the engine is in the front. Matt Shubert on 往前 in context. Could the sentence 一起往前走 also be taken metaphorically, like saying, let's move forward together as a team, nation, family, etc.? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mean, there's lots of ways to head towards, the forward area. There's a more common one that people will say for the metaphorical thing, which is 天天向上. 天天向上, which means to every day head up. So 向, Xiang, is towards. It's one of the other ways to say towards. You know, there's 向往 and 朝. Those three tend to be used, and 对 sometimes too, depending. So those four characters tend to be the characters that orbit the idea of towards. And so 向 is one of them, and 上 just means up. So like 天天, every day, 向上, head up and forward. And that's just a common one that people will say that kind of means let's move forward and get better and all that. But 一起往前走, you can imagine you'd probably specify it in some way, like, like you'd say, as we, are together as a team and a nation, we're going to move forward together. Like, so there would be some surrounding context in all likelihood. Otherwise, it might seem like you're just saying, let's walk forward, which would be a little bit weird. But yeah. Jason Pan on 尤其是 in context. He says, is there a particular difference between 特别 and 尤其是? And the answer to this is that, and he's making the point that they essentially mean especially. Now, I can say that they're pretty much the same when it's 特别是 versus 尤其是. From a meaning perspective, they're almost exactly the same at that point. 特别是 is a little bit more spoken, and it's just kind of like, 成都人都很友好，特别是住在都江堰的人. So, the Chengdu people are the folks in Chengdu are very friendly. Especially is, or extremely is. That's what 特别 means, extremely. So 特别是 is like extremely is, which could be translated to especially. And then the people who live in Dujiangyan. But you could just replace that with 尤其是住在都江堰的人. That would be fine. And so, point being, they're essentially the same as long as 是 comes after 特别, but 特别 is an adverb, so it could come before something else. So like, 你做的饭特别棒. Your cooking is extremely awesome, right? In that case, you cannot replace 特别 with 尤其. You can only because it's not 是 there. It's a different verb, which is 棒. Well, in that case, it's a adjective, but you get the idea. It's an adverb, and adverbs can come before verbs or adjectives. So like depending on the context. So 特别是 and 尤其是 are pretty much exactly the same, with the slight exception being that 尤其是 is a little bit more formal, but you can totally say it in spoken Chinese. So that's the difference. Jason Pan on 那就 in context. He says, are 只有 才 and 只要就 similar, or is 只有才 more strict in terms of meaning. It's mostly about the context in which you would use them. So you would imagine with 只要 some condition 就可以了. Like that's a common one. So like 只要他准时来就可以了. So as long as he arrives on time, we're good, right? And so the idea is, in this case, the context and the feeling is more like, this is likely going to work as long as something is met, right? But 只有 something 才, that has more of a feeling of like, mosquito. That has more of a feeling of, there's only one condition that could possibly make this work. Like the only way to learn Chinese is to study every day. You can't avoid this condition, right? It's got more of a sense of like, you might think there's other ways to do this, but there's only one way. So like the only way to convince him is to bribe him. I don't know. Like just like, there's only one route that could work, and you might think there's many things, but really it's just this one way. Whereas like, as long as has more of this feeling of like, we're expecting this thing to happen, so like, you know, as long as it does, then great. So that's kind of the difference. It's more to do with the context surrounding it than it is with the like technical meaning between the difference, because you could say, you know, one's a condition followed by like, you know, the thing that is meeting that condition, but it's definitely a different context in which you would use them. Jason Pan on 依旧 in context. As a refresher, 开没开, verb may verb. Is that the past version of verb 不 verb? Exactly. So the double verb, you know, the verb plus negation plus verb is just saying is or isn't that verb. And if in the case of, you know, like if I say 你开不开门, 你开不开门, what I'm asking is to the other person, like say someone's knocking on the door, I'm saying, are you going to open the door or not? Right? Whereas if I say 他开没开门, I'm asking, did he open the door or not? Right? Like it's I'm assuming that it's already been done or not been done, but I'm talking about the past. So that's the difference. Pretty straightforward. Next, let's move on to some vocab living links. These are the links that people make to vocab words to try to help remember them. So like something that they can connect to the idea so that they can remember it moving into the future. So the first one is from Tina Clark on Vocab Unlocked from 几个十几几百几千. She says, for 几个, I thought of that game where you guess how many jelly beans are in a jar. Would that be better for 多少? And I responded to this by letting her know that there's kind of two lenses by which you can look at it. One is that, no, it's not a good one because 几个 is between 2 and 10. It's not singular, so it's usually between around 2 and 10. And 十几 is between 10 and 20, and 20几 is between 20 and 30. And so, you know, these different, sorry, there's a mosquito. These different kind of ranges are somewhat specific. And of course, jelly beans are not going to be, like jelly beans are going to be way more than just 10. Otherwise it wouldn't be a game. Like it's like, how many of these 8 jelly beans are there when you can see all of them, right? So 多少 would be better in that sense. But on the other hand, vocab living links aren't that strict, right? Like it's just meant to help you remember the general concept. So if I say 几个 means how many, and then you think of the jelly bean game, which is like how many jelly beans are in here, and that worked, that got you to remember it, then fine. You know, it's you'll figure out the difference between the two naturally moving forward. And so, but that said, after I responded with that, she said, thank you for the speedy reply. I'm going with cupcakes in a bakery for this one. How many do you want? And I'll save the jelly beans for later. Fair enough. And that's good because cupcakes are, you're not going to get like 70 cupcakes, right? You're going to get, you know, somewhere between, you know, like 5 and a dozen or so. So you're in the right range there. Next, Jeremy Marie on Vocab Unlocked from Meiga. I found this particularly difficult to objectify. For anyone who would like some food for thought, a phone book could be said to hold every phone number in a particular region, or a government entity that might know everything about you. Sure, I like those. When I say every, first thing I think of is Every Breath You Take by the Police and Sting singing that song, or Everybody by Backstreet Boys was so popular when I was 12. And that song is just so iconic in my mind, so I could kind of imagine. And I think they were zombies in that movie music video, so like just the Backstreet Boys as zombies, singing everybody. Having that connection to Meg would work just fine for me personally, but everybody's going to be a little bit different. Christopher Neal on Vocab Unlocked from 小时 小心 Googled 小心, and up comes images of signs with caution, wet floor, 小心地滑. Another quick win considering that D, ground, is the last character we learned. That's nice. It's a good little coincidence there. Also, 滑 is one of my favorite characters because the characters are water, which makes sense because you slip on things that are, the components are water, which is the first left side component, and of course you slip on wet surfaces. And then the other component is bone. The right side component is bone, and of course, you slip on water, you might break your bones, right? So, 滑, meaning slippery, is kind of a great character for that. Gavia Arctica on Vocab Unlocked from Shengyin. She says, I used to watch the singing competition The Voice a lot, so this one is clear. That characteristic and easily recognizable red turning chair from The Voice. Yeah, The Voice is only sort of like entered into my mind from a cultural trope perspective, like hearing people talk about it. I don't think I've ever watched the show, but that's the perfect type of thing. If there's a show called The Voice and the meaning of a character is voice, then that's the perfect type of connection. I love that. Tina Clark on Vocab Unlocked from 总是 Love song by The Cure. However far away, I will always love you. And so, yeah, I love songs for living links to abstract concepts like always, because, how else are you supposed to remember this stuff? It's like always is such a abstract concept, but if you have like a connection to it, like Snape in the final Harry Potter film saying always about his love for Lily Potter even after she died, right? So like that's another example. That's a emotional moment from a movie, a great song that you love that has always. Of course, you have the Whitney Houston song "I Will Always Love You." That would work too. Next, we have a few movie scene shares, and then we'll finish up the podcast from there. Jessica M on Make a Movie for "yi." So "yi" means like it's kind of it means different, like as in it's kind of the opposite of 本 in this case. So I might say 本地, meaning like this area, this local area. And if I say 异地, then that means somewhere else, some other area, right? She's coming up with a great scene here. And the reason why I liked this one is because it's very contemporary. So she says, after his divorce with Melinda Gates, Bill goes on a date with the Queen, who also was recently widowed. I guess if you have that much money, you can make anyone go on a date with you. They get in the backyard of North Woodland on the deck. Bill tells her, we were too different. We just drifted apart. She wanted to open the foundation. I'm a libertarian. I even fought to keep the vaccine patents from being given away. Here's my Gadsden flag to prove it. Don't tread on me. And he proudly runs around carrying the flag. And yeah, this obviously, that's why people get divorced, because they realize they're too different. And that's the meaning of this character. But the reason I just love this scene is that it's a reminder that you don't always have to glean from your very deep history of something that happened in your childhood for your movie scenes. Sometimes you can just pull contemporary news. And so awesome scene there from Jessica. Ric Santos on Make a Movie for Li, which means sort of reason or logic. It's one of my favorite characters. And I like it because it's like the king is logic, because it's got that king component in it. And so it's kind of an interesting way to conceptualize the characters. So he says, Li actress, the living room of the Null set. She thought all along that the king rules with logic and reason, only to find out that it was a computer doing all the work for him when the king brought his computer with him. But the king was just using logic and reason. He practically owned the whole village, Li, including the living room, third in the null set where the LI actress lived. Logical Lee. I like that. Nice. Well, as usual, Rick is, not only having a good scene there, but also pulling in a few extra little hooks to his memory, and excellent scene there. Finally, we have Will Raley on Make a Movie for Zeng, which means to increase or add. Zack Snyder at ENG's front door. Zack needs to increase the size of a wedding cake, which is the right side component he is delivering. He adds a load of soil to the wedding cake, which increases its size. Gross. I love it. So, using the two components well, adding to it, you could I can even imagine sort of like this fakeness to the wedding cake as you fill it up with soil in the bottom and just ice over the soil to, make it seem bigger than it is. I like it. Awesome. That'll do it for this week's Mandarin Blueprint Podcast. Again, thank you to those of you who donated this week to our GoFundMe for the advanced course. It's been highly rewarding to work on it, and we're super happy that you guys are so supportive of the course. And don't forget to head to mandarinblueprint.com, start a free trial. No credit card required, 30 days. You can check out Pronunciation Mastery in Phase 1. And for that reason, we think you'll really love the course. So, signing off for this week. Luke will be back here next week, and we'll see you then.